In the quaint town of Willow Creek, nestled between winding streets and cozy cafes, there's a small bookstore called Willow Pages. It's more than just a shop. It's a sanctuary for dreamers, readers, and one determined woman named Nora. Nora's love for books runs deep, but her beloved bookstore is struggling. Bills pile up, customers fade, and whispers from a rival threaten everything she's worked for. Just when she's about to lose hope, a quiet customer named Caleb begins showing up, not just to buy books but to listen, to encourage, to care. What Nora doesn't know is that Caleb isn't who he appears to be. Behind his kind eyes and unassuming presence lies a secret that could change everything. As sabotage creeps in from the shadows, friendships are tested, lies unravel, and Nora must decide who to trust when the person she's leaning on may be hiding the biggest truth of all. Will betrayal break her spirit, or will love write a new ending? If you've ever believed in second chances, quiet heroes, and the power of truth, this story is for you. Subscribe now and don't miss a single chapter of this unforgettable journey. The soft chime above the door rang as another gust of autumn wind slipped inside Willow Pages. Nora glanced up from behind the counter, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She loved this time of year, when the smell of spiced cider hung in the air and the leaves rustled like whispers through the quiet town of Willow Creek. But today, even the comfort of her favorite season couldn't ease the knot in her chest. A man wandered in, shoulders dusted with gold leaves. He looked around as if each shelf held a secret. Nora watched him, curious. He didn't match the usual crowd of college students or elderly locals. Worn boots, clean but aged. A coat that had seen better winters. Yet there was something composed about him, something quietly confident. He wandered toward the fiction section, brushing his fingers along the spines like he was greeting old friends. "You looking for anything specific?" Nora asked, stepping out from behind the counter. He looked up, blue-gray eyes warm. "Just stories worth getting lost in." Nora smiled, a little surprised by the poetry of the answer. "Then you're in the right place." She walked him over to a table where she just arranged a stack of her favorite, lesser-known novels. "These don't make the bestseller lists, but they'll stay with you longer." He picked one up, reading the blurb on the back. "You must really love books." "I do," she said, folding her arms across her cardigan. "Books don't judge. They wait patiently, speak softly, and always give you something back." He looked at her then, not just glanced, but saw her. "That's a beautiful way to put it." She flushed slightly, not used to being noticed beyond the title of shop owner. She offered her hand. "I'm Nora." He took it gently. "Caleb." "First time in Willow Creek?" she asked, leading him to the register. "Just passing through," Caleb said, though the truth was more complicated. His publishing company, Pinnacle Press, had been researching small towns for their new initiative to support independent bookstores. But he hadn't told anyone at corporate that he'd be visiting one himself, certainly not under a false pretense. He looked around the store. Wooden shelves worn with age, handwritten recommendation cards tucked between titles, a bulletin board overflowing with local events. It was the kind of place he'd dreamed of as a boy when his world had felt too chaotic to bear. And she, the woman at its center, wasn't chasing trends. She was curating stories like a craftsperson, an artist. "You run this place all on your own?" he asked. Nora nodded. "My mom opened it. I took over after she passed. It hasn't been easy, but this shop is everything to me." Caleb tucked his newly purchased novel into his coat pocket. "It shows." Outside, Evelyn watched from the sidewalk, her lips tight. Her own store, the book loft just a few blocks away, boasted slick shelves and celebrity memoirs. Nora's store shouldn't have had loyal foot traffic, but it did. and Evelyn was tired of playing second place in their unspoken rivalry. Back inside, Nora exhaled as Caleb left. She didn't know who he was or why his visit lingered in her thoughts like the scent of old paper and pine wood, but something about him felt like a chapter just beginning. She returned to the counter and glanced at her open ledger. The red ink hadn't vanished. Bills were still due, but somehow, tonight, her heart felt just a little less heavy. Some stories, she thought, don't start with fireworks. They start with a quiet hello. The morning sun cast long beams across the wood-paneled walls of Willow Pages, dust dancing through the light like tiny spirits. Nora leaned on the front counter, staring at the payment reminder from the electric company. The numbers glared at her, sharp and cold against the warmth of her shop. She folded the paper and tucked it under the register, refusing to let it ruin her day again. The bell above the door jingled, breaking her thoughts. "Hey, Nora," came a voice that always felt too sweet to be real. Nora turned to see Evelyn Westwood step in with her usual designer tote slung over one arm and a latte balanced perfectly in hand. "Morning, Evelyn. Thought I'd stop by and say hi. I saw your window display last night. So charming," Evelyn said, looking around with an air of polite disapproval. "A bit vintage, maybe, but I'm sure that's your thing." Nora smiled politely. "Thanks. I like to keep it cozy." Evelyn nodded, eyes scanning the nearly empty store. "You know, some folks were talking at the Chamber of Commerce mixer, concerned actually. Heard a rumor you've been selling used books as new?" Nora's smile dropped. "That's not true." "Of course not. I told them you'd never do something like that," Evelyn said quickly, the faux concern heavy in her tone. "Just thought you should know what's going around." Nora's heart sank. "Thanks for the heads up." With a satisfied grin masked as empathy, Evelyn sauntered back out, her heels clicking against the tile. As the door shut behind her, Nora sank onto the stool behind the counter. It wasn't just the rumor. It was when it came. Business had slowed this week. A couple of regulars had canceled their special orders. Now it made sense. Later that afternoon, Nora met Caleb for a stroll through the park. The leaves had turned a brilliant gold, and families crunched through them on the winding paths. Caleb showed up with 2 hot chocolates, one of which he handed to her without a word. She gave him a grateful smile. "You look like the weight of the world's on your shoulders," he said softly. She shrugged. "It's been a rough week. Someone's spreading lies about my store, saying I repackage used books. It's ridiculous, but people believe what they want to believe." Caleb frowned, his eyes darkening. "Who would do that?" "I have a guess," Nora muttered. "Evelyn's always been competitive, but lately, I don't know, it feels personal." Caleb sipped his drink, silent for a moment. "That's messed up. You work too hard for this." Nora nodded, biting her lip. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. I mean, I love this shop, but I'm barely staying afloat. One bad month and I could lose it all." Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. "Then let me help." She laughed softly. "What, are you going to start buying every book in the store?" "Maybe," he said with a small smile. Nora looked at him for a beat, something in her chest softening. Caleb had become the calm in her storm, a quiet, consistent presence that felt more real than anything else in her chaotic world. "Thanks," she whispered. "Even if all you do is listen, it helps." Caleb nodded, but his mind was already turning. He didn't care about keeping his identity hidden for the sake of mystery anymore. He just wanted to see her win, and if that meant acting behind the scenes, then so be it. Back at the book loft, Evelyn tapped through her phone, watching Nora and Caleb from her second-story window. Her expression hardened. She didn't know who Caleb really was yet, but something told her she was going to find out, and when she did, she'd make sure Willow Pages was nothing more than a memory. The scent of fresh coffee and old paper filled the cozy air inside Willow Pages the next morning. Nora had just flipped the "Open" sign when she noticed a sleek black car idle briefly across the street. She didn't think much of it until the day started unfolding in the most unexpected way. By mid-morning, the bell above the door jingled again and again. A stream of new faces wandered through the aisles, some asking about signed first editions, others complimenting the new display Nora had barely rearranged the night before. "Do you have copies of Falling Leaves by Juliet Mendez?" one woman asked, her designer tote and camera in hand. Nora blinked. "Yes, a few in the back. You're lucky. It's been hard to get in stock lately." The woman grinned. "She's doing a signing here today, right?" Nora nearly dropped the mug she was holding. I'm sorry? Who?" The woman's smile faltered. "Juliet Mendez. Her newsletter said she'd be signing at Willow Pages. Didn't you organize it?" Before Nora could respond, the front door opened again, and in walked Juliet Mendez herself, best-selling romance author and local legend, flanked by a petite assistant and holding a box of fountain pens. "Hi," Juliet said warmly. "I hope I'm not too early. I like to set up myself when I can." Nora stared at her like a deer in headlights. No, you're right on time. Let me get the signing table ready." It took everything in her to not look completely frazzled. Caleb, who had dropped in moments before, watched from the corner of the shop, pretending to skim a poetry collection. He offered Nora a wink when she passed him, carrying a stack of books. 2 hours later, the shop was buzzing. A line curled out the door. Photos were being snapped, coffee served, and for the first time, in months, the register kept ringing. Nora moved like a current, fluid, energized, hopeful. When Juliet waved her over between signings, Nora leaned in. "You didn't have to do this," Nora said, still unsure how it had all happened. Juliet smiled. "I didn't plan it. Someone from my team got a personal call from an anonymous admirer of literature who said your store was the heart of this town." Nora looked toward Caleb, who was now helping a child reach a book from the top shelf. He caught her gaze and smiled. That evening, as the last customer left and Juliet departed with her assistant, Nora locked the front door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. "That was surreal." Caleb chuckled from the register where he was stacking leftover bookmarks. "Looks like you made quite an impression." "I didn't even plan it," she said. "But whoever did saved my shop today." Caleb shrugged. "Maybe it was just your time to shine." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Thank you for helping today, really. You didn't have to stay." His smile deepened, almost wistful. "I like being here." The silence between them was warm, not awkward, comforting. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from her accountant. "Sales numbers from today look fantastic. And the buzz online? You're trending locally. Keep it up, Nora." Her throat tightened as she read it. For the first time in a while, things didn't feel like they were falling apart. Meanwhile, across town at the book loft, Evelyn stood in her own near-empty store, scrolling through social media posts of the Juliet Mendez event at Willow Pages. Her lips tightened. "She's not supposed to be winning," Evelyn whispered to herself. But she wouldn't stay silent much longer. The sun spilled golden light across Main Street as Nora opened Willow Pages early the next morning, still riding the high from the author signing. She hadn't stopped smiling since Juliet Mendez's visit, and the store had seen a steady uptick in foot traffic all weekend. Caleb arrived shortly after with 2 coffees in hand, hers with a splash of almond milk, just how she liked it. "You're becoming alarmingly predictable," Nora teased as he handed her the cup. "Or delightfully consistent," Caleb replied with a grin. They spent the morning chatting and shelving new shipments. It felt easy, peaceful, like the world had stopped spinning just long enough for Nora to catch her breath. But by mid-afternoon, the peace shattered. "Hey, Nora," said Brianna, her weekend employee, walking in with a confused frown. "I checked the inventory before the book fair deliveries were supposed to go out. They're gone." Nora froze mid-step. "Gone?" Brianna nodded. "Half the pre-orders, titles we promised for the Willow Creek book fair." Nora rushed behind the counter, logging into their system. Page after page of the missing orders flashed across the screen. Entire boxes of books simply vanished from the manifest. According to the system, they'd never been ordered at all. "That's not possible. I placed that order 2 weeks ago," she murmured. She called their distributor. The rep on the phone apologized, explaining that the order had been canceled from Nora's end the day after it was placed. "I never canceled anything," she insisted. "It came through as a digital cancellation. From your store login," the rep said. "I'm sorry, Ms. Lang." As she ended the call, her hands trembled. Panic gripped her chest. The book fair was in 3 days. Missing inventory meant missing sales, possibly thousands in losses. Brianna rubbed her arm. "Should I call the other suppliers?" "Yeah," Nora said, barely above a whisper. "Let's see what we can recover." Just then, Caleb stepped up beside her. "I heard. Anything I can do?" She looked at him, frustration swelling behind her eyes. "Unless you can magic an entire shipment of books here by Thursday, I don't think so." He didn't press further, just gently squeezed her shoulder. "I'll see what I can do anyway." Later that night, after the store had closed and Nora sat at her desk sifting through backup files, Caleb made a quiet phone call in the alley beside the building. "I need to reroute a few shipments from Pinnacle's warehouse. Priority overnight. No, don't mention the sender. Just make sure they arrive at Willow Pages by tomorrow morning." Back inside, Nora rubbed her temples. Something about the cancellation didn't sit right. She scrolled through her system logs, checking timestamps. A cancellation request had been logged, but not by her. The action had been approved using her credentials, though the IP address didn't match the shop's. Someone had sabotaged her. Her heart sank as a bitter realization dawned. Evelyn, the only other person with a motive and enough knowledge of the system to pull it off. The next morning, when Nora unlocked the front door, 3 large boxes were stacked on the doorstep. She tore one open and found the missing books, pristine and perfectly packed. Inside was a note. No name, just a simple message written in clean cursive. "Don't let someone else write the ending to your story." She clutched the note to her chest, eyes stinging. Caleb arrived moments later. "Rough night?" Nora blinked back tears and smiled. "You could say that. But the cavalry showed up." He raised an eyebrow, and she added quietly, "Whoever they are, they believe in me." As she carried the boxes inside, Evelyn watched from across the street, her smile brittle and cold. If Nora wanted to play hero, Evelyn would make sure the story didn't end with a happily ever after. The Willow Creek Book Fair turned out to be a surprising triumph for Nora. Thanks to the anonymous delivery, her booth stood full, vibrant, and bustling with curious readers. Customers left with shopping bags and smiles, and word of Willow Pages' warm, personal charm began to spread. But beneath the surface, Nora's nerves simmered. The mysterious note, the sudden reappearance of canceled books, and the suspicion that someone, probably Evelyn, had hacked her system. It gnawed at her, even as she smiled and rang up purchases. Late Sunday evening, Nora sat on the shop's worn leather armchair, laptop open, rechecking her files. Just as she leaned back to breathe, her phone buzzed with a message from her friend Lisa, who worked part-time at the Willow Creek Literary Council. "Hey, did you know Evelyn just got selected to pitch her community reading lounge concept to the regional festival committee? I thought that was your idea." Nora froze. She clicked into her cloud folder. The presentation draft she'd spent weeks perfecting for the regional literary festival, her layout sketches, programming outlines, even her proposal notes, were gone, completely wiped from her drive. Her hands trembled. This wasn't a coincidence. It was theft. How did she even get into my files? The next morning, Caleb walked into Willow Pages with fresh muffins and a hopeful smile, but one look at Nora told him something was wrong. "Don't tell me you hate Blueberry," he joked, trying to lift her mood. "Evelyn stole my pitch," Nora said, her voice flat. "For the regional festival. Every single file. Gone." Caleb's smile faded. "How?" "I think she accessed it from my old backup link. One I used to email myself last year. I never changed the password," Nora muttered, angry at herself. "And now she's pitching it as her own." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You sure it's your idea?" "She even kept the name," Nora snapped. "Chapter and Community. I came up with that while shelving books during a snowstorm last January." He sat across from her. "You can still present it. Let the committee decide. I can't prove it's mine anymore. She has the files, the timestamp, everything." Caleb leaned forward, steady and calm. "What if you pitched something better?" "I worked on that idea for 6 months," Nora said quietly. "It was everything I had left to offer this place." The hurt in her voice pulled at him. He wanted to tell her everything, that he could fix this with one phone call, that Evelyn would be blacklisted from every credible publisher in the state if he exposed her. But he knew, the moment he revealed his power, the fragile trust he'd built with Nora might shatter. Instead, he said, "Then we rebuild. Together." Nora glanced at him, searching his face. "Why do you always show up when things fall apart?" He smiled gently. "Maybe I like bookstores." She shook her head, her lips tugging into the faintest smile. "You're a terrible liar." That night, while Nora revisited her old journals and notes, trying to resurrect something new, Caleb made a quiet call to an old college friend, now an IP lawyer. "I need to track the source of a file theft," he said. "No names yet, just the IPs. Discreetly." Meanwhile, Evelyn basked in her temporary glory. Her assistant handed her a mock-up of the proposal, now printed with her name. She skimmed it with a smug grin. "She'll bounce back," Evelyn muttered, but not fast enough. What Evelyn didn't realize was that Nora wasn't alone this time, and Caleb wasn't just a quiet, kind customer. He was a quiet storm. A week after Evelyn stole her proposal, Nora found herself drowning in disappointment. The foot traffic at Willow Pages had slowed again. The fleeting buzz from the book fair had vanished. And, worst of all, the literary festival Nora once dreamed of attending now listed Evelyn's name as one of its highlighted speakers. She sat in the dim light of her back office, fiddling with the corner of a receipt, her head aching from overthinking. The idea of starting over from scratch felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. Just then, her assistant Jenny peeked in. "Hey, Nora, there's someone from the Fernridge Book Club here. They want to talk." Nora blinked. "The Fernridge? The one with the podcast and newsletter?" Jenny nodded. "They said they want to do a feature on Willow Pages." Nora stood up slowly, heart thudding. "What?" 5 minutes later, she stood at the front desk shaking hands with Margaret Lynn, founder of one of the state's most followed book clubs. Margaret beamed. "I just had to visit in person. One of our members came to your booth at the Willow Creek Fair and hasn't stopped raving about your recommendations. I figured, why not shine a spotlight on something real?" Nora could hardly find the words. I'd be honored." They set a date for an interview and a club meet and greet. By the end of the week, Willow Pages had a framed feature in the local paper and a photo of Nora grinning with the Fernridge team. New customers trickled in. Teachers, librarians, high school students, even a few curious tourists. Still, the mystery of how that feature happened lingered, and Caleb had been strangely absent that week. Nora sat on the shop's front steps one evening, a soft breeze carrying the scent of old paper and summer rain. Just as she sipped her tea, Caleb approached, holding 2 wrapped sandwiches. "I figured you forgot to eat again," he said, sitting beside her. "You've been MIA," Nora teased, nudging him with her shoulder. "Busy week?" "Something like that," he replied, smiling faintly. They ate in silence for a few minutes, watching cars glide past the bookstore's window-lit front. Then Nora asked, "You wouldn't happen to know anything about Fernridge Book Club dropping in, would you?" Caleb shrugged innocently. "Maybe they just love good books." She narrowed her eyes. "You're hiding something." "I prefer the word helping quietly." Nora laughed softly. "You're a puzzle, Caleb. You never ask for anything, but you're always there." He looked down at the paper sandwich wrapper, suddenly unsure what to say. The truth sat on the tip of his tongue. Who he really was, what he'd done to protect her, how deeply he cared. Instead, he said, "You don't owe me anything, Nora. I just believe in what you're building." She paused, caught by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, the world around them slowed. There was a gravity in his words, something deeper than casual support. And she felt it too. Their hands brushed slightly between them on the step, but neither moved away. Inside the bookstore, Jenny peeked through the curtain and smiled. Later that night, Evelyn scrolled through her feed and nearly dropped her wine glass when she saw the Fernridge post. "Rediscovering literary joy at Willow Pages. Real stories, real people, real heart." Her face flushed. "Who's helping her?" she muttered, zooming in on the photo. Then she froze. In the background stood Caleb, shelving books near the window. She narrowed her eyes. "Time to find out exactly who you are, mystery man." Unbeknownst to Nora, the stakes were about to rise, and the secret Caleb kept was no longer entirely safe. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Willow Pages, casting golden rays on the polished hardwood floors. Nora, energized by the bookstore's recent resurgence, hummed as she rearranged a display of new releases. Customers were beginning to recognize Willow Pages as more than just a local store. It was becoming a beloved destination again. Caleb walked in holding 2 paper cups from the corner cafe. "For the lady who works too hard," he said with a smile, placing one beside her register. "You're spoiling me," Nora teased, brushing her bangs back with ink-smudged fingers. "You don't have to keep bringing coffee." "I like seeing you smile," Caleb replied simply. Nora looked at him, her eyes softening. She couldn't deny the connection that had slowly deepened between them over the past few weeks. He was a quiet presence, steady and kind, with a sincerity that felt rare. She didn't need to question it. Until now, he had only ever given. But down the street, Evelyn wasn't smiling. She was pacing in her office, phone pressed tightly to her ear. On her desk was a printed photo from the Fernridge Book Club's social post. Her assistant had zoomed in on a figure in the background. Evelyn had done a reverse image search, and her jaw had dropped. "Caleb Walker," she muttered into the phone, "CEO of Pinnacle Press, billionaire publisher. What's he doing posing as a small-town book nerd?" The voice on the other end replied, "That's him, all right. Went quiet 2 years ago after his father passed. Shifted focus to grassroots literary ventures." Evelyn ended the call, her eyes narrowing. So, that's how she's suddenly gotten interviews, signings, and book club features. Later that day, Evelyn sauntered into Willow Pages like a wolf in silk. She spotted Caleb reading in a back corner and approached with practiced charm. "Caleb, isn't it?" she asked, voice syrupy. He looked up cautiously. "Yes?" "I think we should talk, privately." They stepped outside, just beyond earshot of the windows. Evelyn leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed. "You've been quite the mystery man around town," she said, watching his reaction. "But I did a little digging. Pinnacle Press, Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "You've been bankrolling Nora, haven't you?" She continued smiling. Anonymous donations, secret promotions, favors from high places. It's all starting to make sense. Caleb exhaled slowly. What do you want, Evelyn? Stop helping her. Walk away. Disappear. Whatever you've been doing behind the scenes, end it. Or I'll out you publicly. She'll know you've been lying, and she won't take it kindly. Caleb stared at her, heart pounding. You're threatening both of us. No, Evelyn said coolly. I'm protecting what's mine. I built Silverleaf Books from scratch. I've got investors, reputations, and events lined up. I can't let some charity case win because she caught the eye of a bored CEO. She gave him a final smirk before walking off. You've got until Friday. Caleb stood frozen on the sidewalk, her words echoing in his ears. He had always known this day might come, the moment his secret could unravel everything. But now, it wasn't just about him, it was about Nora. That night, he sat in his apartment, a rare glass of scotch untouched beside him. He stared at a photograph of his late father, a man who had built Pinnacle Press with his bare hands. I didn't come here to fall in love, he muttered aloud. But she's the realest thing I've known in years. He opened his laptop and began reviewing records, donations, invoices, timelines, preparing for whatever Evelyn might do. But as he worked, a pit of dread settled in his stomach. Because he knew Evelyn wouldn't stop with threats, she was planning something bigger. And it wouldn't just hurt him, it would destroy Nora if she didn't see it coming. The next morning dawned gray over Willow Creek, the bookstore shrouded in a soft drizzle. Nora stood behind the counter at Willow Pages reviewing invoices for last week's shipments, her brows furrowed. Something wasn't right. Several orders, books she distinctly remembered approving, were missing. Worse, there were several high-cost entries for titles she hadn't stocked. She flipped through the binder again, heart pounding now. These weren't just errors. Someone had altered her inventory logs. As if on cue, her boss, Linda, stepped through the front door, rain still on her coat and tension on her face. Nora, can we talk in the back? Nora followed, nerves tightening. Linda handed her a printed spreadsheet and a customer complaint letter. This came in from corporate accounting this morning, Linda said. Your section is flagged for financial discrepancies, over $6,000 in unaccounted purchases. Nora's voice trembled. What? That doesn't make sense. I keep detailed records, Linda, I swear. Linda's face was unreadable. They found forged purchase orders with your initials. I don't want to believe it, but until this is resolved, they've asked that you step down temporarily. Nora felt the ground tilt beneath her. You think I stole from the store? I don't want to think that, Linda said gently, but the paper trail says otherwise. Nora left the office in silence, her chest hollow. She walked through the store like a ghost, every shelf a memory. The place she had poured her soul into, her second home, was now shutting her out. Outside, the drizzle had turned to rain. She stood beneath the bookstore's awning, her arms folded tight against her chest, trying not to cry. Across the street, Caleb watched from inside his car, parked discreetly. He'd planned to come in, to offer comfort after Evelyn's threat the day before, but when he saw Nora's face, pale, devastated, he knew something had gone terribly wrong. His phone buzzed, a message from Evelyn. You chose her, so I made my move. Let's see if she still wants your help when she finds out who you really are. Caleb clenched the phone, rage simmering just beneath the surface. He had underestimated Evelyn's cruelty. This wasn't a threat, it was an attack. He returned to his apartment and immediately began digging. He had access to systems Evelyn didn't know about. He called in favors from his legal team, forensic accountants, and even a retired cyber investigator who owed his father a favor. Within hours, he had a list of the forged purchase orders. The handwriting matched Evelyn's assistant's. The IP address used to send the faked documents belonged to a device registered under Silverleaf Books' account. It was enough to start building a case, but not enough to clear Nora officially yet. Meanwhile, Nora sat at home, her small apartment dim and silent. She hadn't even taken off her raincoat. Her phone sat untouched on the kitchen table, vibrating with missed calls, Caleb's name glowing again and again on the screen. But she couldn't bring herself to answer. She trusted him. She let him in. And, somehow, everything still collapsed. The memory of Evelyn's smirk a few days ago crossed her mind. Had Evelyn known this was coming, or worse, planned it? Tears finally came. Not loud sobs, just silent, aching tears that slid down her cheeks as she curled up on the couch. She didn't know who to trust anymore. Not Linda, not corporate, maybe not even Caleb. All she had left was her love for books, and even that felt fragile now. At that same moment, Caleb stood by his window, looking out over the rainy streets of Willow Creek. He knew he had to act fast. Because if he didn't clear Nora's name soon, he might lose her for good. The cold weight of betrayal hadn't lifted. Nora walked the streets of Willow Creek like a ghost in her own town. Each familiar face now looked unfamiliar. Was that pity in their eyes? Or judgment? She no longer knew. She couldn't return to Willow Pages, not yet. The suspension stung, not just for what it took from her, but what it said about how little she was believed. Still, she couldn't sit in her apartment forever, paralyzed. That's when the idea came. A pop-up stall. She'd noticed the old courtyard space by the local cafe, just a few stone steps and a wooden overhang. On a whim, she spoke to the cafe owner, Mr. Grady, a kindly man with a long gray beard and a quiet voice. "You want to set up shop here?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "Just on weekends," she said, hands clasped. "Second-hand books, local authors, I'll keep it neat." Grady gave her a long look, then nodded. "You've got a good heart, Nora, and you've been kicked enough lately. Go on, then." That Saturday morning, she opened her modest stall, Nora's Nook. She displayed paperbacks on repurposed crates, hung fairy lights along the overhang, and played gentle jazz from a Bluetooth speaker. And people came, curious, supportive, hopeful. Word spread. Some customers who had stopped visiting Willow Pages showed up with coffee and kind words. Children picked picture books. Teenagers browsed poetry. One woman bought an entire stack of Nora's recommended shelf. It didn't make up for the bookstore, but it made her feel like herself again. Across town, Caleb sat in his home office, surrounded by evidence. His desk was buried in files, metadata, timestamps, transaction logs, and scanned invoices. He hadn't slept properly in 2 days. But he finally had what he needed. He stared at the compiled report, neatly labeled with Evelyn's name and her assistant's IP addresses, login times, and bank transfers. She hadn't just framed Nora. She'd siphoned small amounts from multiple accounts for months. He picked up his phone and dialed a trusted contact at the Willow Creek Legal Bureau. "Eli, it's Caleb. I need a private consult. It's urgent." The next morning, Caleb walked into Willow Pages, not to browse, but to leave something behind. He approached Linda's office quietly and slid a sealed envelope under her door. Inside was the entire file, along with a brief note. "Please read, and do what's right. A friend." He didn't sign his name. Then he went to Nora's Nook. She was restocking a small poetry shelf when she spotted him. Her face tightened, but she didn't look away. Caleb offered a cautious smile. "Hey, she replied, polite but guarded. "I heard about the stall," he said, glancing around. "It's beautiful. Looks like you." She nodded. "Thanks. I needed something to keep going." They stood in silence as a breeze rustled the pages on the table between them. "I wanted to check on you," Caleb said. "I know things have been hard." Nora looked up, her voice quiet. It's not just that I was accused. It's that no one really stood up for me. Not even you. Caleb swallowed hard. I'm sorry. She nodded, lips pressed together. I just need space. I'm rebuilding from scratch. He didn't push. Then I'll let you rebuild. Just know that someone's in your corner, even if it's quiet. With that, he left. As he walked away, Nora stared after him, a knot forming in her chest. Something about the way he spoke, the gentleness in his words, it echoed louder than she expected. That night, Linda called. Nora, we need to talk. I think you should come by first thing in the morning. Nora froze, the phone pressed to her ear. Linda's voice wasn't cold. It was shaken. What's this about? She asked. I think we've made a mistake. The Willow Creek Literary Festival buzzed with energy as authors, publishers, and readers wandered beneath strings of lights and colorful banners fluttering in the spring breeze. Booths lined the town square, filled with book readings, signing tables, and live poetry corners. Nora arrived early with a quiet determination etched across her face. She had debated not attending. After all, she was still suspended from Willow Pages, her reputation tarnished and trust shattered. But this pop-up festival appearance had been arranged long before Evelyn's sabotage, and Nora wouldn't let her steal that, too. She set up a modest booth. A folding table draped in a hand-sewn linen cloth, stacked with second-hand novels and her hand-picked favorites. Nora's Nook was written on a chalkboard sign in careful script. Just as she was placing her last bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar, Evelyn strolled over. I have to say, Nora, Evelyn purred, I admire your optimism. Nora didn't rise to the bait. This festival is for readers. I'm just here to share books. Evelyn's lips curled. You won't be for long. Nora furrowed her brow. But before she could respond, a crowd began to gather. Evelyn stepped forward, now holding a thick envelope. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out, raising her voice, before we celebrate literature, I believe the community deserves to know the truth. Nora's heart dropped. This woman, Evelyn gestured to Nora, has been under internal investigation for financial misconduct at Willow Pages, forged invoices, missing funds. And now, she has the audacity to set up a booth here? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nora opened her mouth, but words faltered. Maybe this stall is just another scam, Evelyn sneered. Or maybe it's time someone held her accountable. Just then, a clear voice rang out from behind the crowd. That's enough. Heads turned. Caleb stepped into view, wearing a tailored navy blazer, no longer the quiet man in bookstore corners. His presence commanded attention, calm and unwavering. Evelyn's smirk twitched. And who exactly are you? She asked, crossing her arms. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a thin manila folder. My name is Caleb Moore. I'm the CEO of Pinnacle Press. The crowd gasped again, this time louder. Nora froze. Caleb? CEO? I've gathered evidence, he continued. Not only is Nora innocent, but Evelyn here has been using company accounts to funnel money into her personal ventures. She hacked into Willow Pages' back-end system and framed Nora using forged documents. He handed the folder to a local journalist who happened to be nearby. Bank statements, IP logs, time-stamped login credentials, all of it traceable to Evelyn's home computer. Evelyn's face drained of color. I suggest you take a look before you publish your next community article, Caleb said to the reporter. You'll find the truth is far more interesting than the gossip. Someone in the crowd muttered, We always knew something was off. Evelyn tried to stammer a reply, but a pair of bookstore representatives, Linda among them, stepped forward. We'll handle it from here, Linda said sternly. Evelyn, I think you've said enough." Evelyn's protests died in her throat as she was quietly led away. Nora stood still, the chaos around her blurring as she stared at Caleb. He approached slowly. "I should have told you sooner, about who I was." Her voice cracked. "You? Pinnacle Press?" "I never wanted you to see me as someone with money," he admitted. "I just wanted to be the guy who believed in your passion. And when you needed help, I couldn't stand by." Tears welled in Nora's eyes, not from sadness but from the sheer weight of everything being stripped bare in public. She looked at her little stall, still standing, and then at Caleb. And she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, always. That evening, the bookstore lights were off, but Nora lingered inside, seated behind the register with her arms crossed over her chest. The warmth of the overhead bulbs had long since faded, replaced by a soft, bluish hue from the street lamp outside, filtering in through the window. The bells above the door jingled softly. She looked up. Caleb stood there, his hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable, somewhere between hopeful and afraid. "Hey," he said gently. Nora didn't respond right away. She looked back down at the journal in front of her. A page was half filled with handwriting, but her pen had stopped mid-sentence hours ago. "You didn't have to come," she said, voice tight. "I know," Caleb replied, stepping further inside, "but I hoped you'd let me explain." "You already did," she said, still not looking at him. "At the festival. In front of everyone." He took a slow breath. "That was about Evelyn. This is about us." Nora finally looked up. "You lied to me, Caleb." "I didn't lie. I hid the truth," he said quietly. "Not because I didn't trust you. I didn't trust what my name, what my money, would do to our connection." She stood, the stool scraping softly against the wood floor. "You let me believe you were just another book lover, a kind stranger who helped me because he cared. I do care, Nora. But how could I ever know if any of this was real?" she asked, gesturing around the shop. "The book club feature, the author signing, the expo placement, all of it. Was it really me, or was it you pulling strings in the background?" Caleb stepped closer. "You earned every bit of attention. I just gave fate a little nudge when you deserved more than what the world was offering." Her shoulders dropped. "You could have told me. Instead, I found out with the whole town watching." "I was scared," Caleb confessed. "Scared that if you knew who I really was, you'd pull away. That you'd think everything between us was built on some savior complex." Silence fell between them. Then Nora spoke again, softer this time. "You weren't wrong to be afraid, because that's exactly how I feel right now." The words hit him like a punch. "I need time," she continued, her voice wavering. "Time to figure out if I can still trust what we had, or if I was just falling for a version of you that never existed." Caleb swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I'll give you all the time you need. But Nora, please believe me when I say that the man who shelved books beside you, who drank coffee while listening to you talk about your favorite novels, that was me. Just without the job title." She looked at him for a long moment, and despite the betrayal, despite the swirl of doubt, there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes of the man who'd stood beside her through every storm. Outside, headlights passed by, casting flickering shadows across the shelves of Willow Pages. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He set it on the counter. "What's this?" Nora asked cautiously. "It's the grant confirmation for the bookstore expansion. I pulled a few strings, but the funding is yours. No attachments, no name-dropping, just you, moving forward." She stared at it, not touching it. "I won't bother you again," he said softly, "unless you want me to." He turned and walked out, the bell jingling once more as the door shut behind him. Nora stood in the quiet. Then she looked down at the paper. And for the first time in weeks, her fingers trembled not from fear, but from the weight of a love that might still be real. If only she could find a way to trust again. The morning sun spilled across Willow Creek's main street, casting soft golden light through the front windows of the pop-up stall Nora had built from scratch. It was modest, just a folding table covered with burlap and stacked with hand-picked paperbacks, handwritten recommendation cards, and a sign that read, "Books that Breathe Life, curated by Nora." The stall stood near the farmer's market, nestled between a coffee vendor and a stall selling fresh honey. Foot traffic was slow at first, but Nora greeted each passerby with the same quiet enthusiasm she always had at Willow Pages. Gentle suggestions, genuine questions, eyes lighting up when someone said, "I haven't read in years," and then the grant arrived. A thick envelope bearing the logo of the Willow Creek Small Business Initiative. Nora had stared at it for a long time before opening it, fearing disappointment. But inside was a letter confirming she'd been awarded a development grant, enough to reopen Willow Pages in a permanent space, upgrade her systems, and even hire part-time help. She'd cried quietly behind her stall, the letter trembling in her hands, her joy tinged with disbelief. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Caleb had submitted the application weeks ago, under her name, using excerpts from her blog, quotes from satisfied customers, and even a photo he'd taken of her smiling in front of the old bookstore window. But for now, she believed it was the universe finally giving her a chance to breathe again. Later that week, Nora stood in front of the newly leased storefront on Maple and 3rd, a bright, open corner unit with large windows and built-in shelving along the walls. It smelled faintly of cedar and opportunity. Caleb joined her there, invited this time. He stood beside her as she unlocked the door, both of them quiet for a moment as the door creaked open. "Feels like a blank page," she said softly. "Then let's write something worth remembering," he replied. She looked at him, his eyes gentle, cautious. There was still space between them, but it no longer felt like a chasm, more like a paragraph break. "I haven't forgiven you," she said, not unkindly. "I know, but I see you." Caleb nodded, words caught in his throat. They spent the afternoon sweeping the floors, wiping down shelves, and mapping out the new layout. It wasn't as romantic as a candlelit dinner, but it was them. Two people rebuilding, literally and figuratively, side by side. Outside, people began to notice the banner. Willow Pages, reopening soon. Curious eyes peeked through the windows. Friends dropped by to offer hugs and congratulations. Someone brought coffee. And across town, Evelyn's store, once the envy of local booksellers, sat half empty. Her reputation had crumbled after Caleb's public unveiling and Nora's quiet rise. Vendors pulled out. Readers stopped trusting her recommendations. Her name was no longer spoken with admiration, but discomfort. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Back inside the new Willow Pages, Nora placed the last book on the central display, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird with a handwritten card that read, "Truth matters. So does kindness." As the day came to a close, Caleb handed her a small package wrapped in craft paper. She opened it carefully. Inside was a custom bookplate stamped with the shop's new slogan, "Where stories begin again." Her throat tightened. "You did all this quietly," she said. He shrugged. "Loud gestures are easy. Quiet loyalty takes more." Nora didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Instead, she stepped forward and rested her head gently against his shoulder, just for a moment. Caleb exhaled. his hand resting lightly at her back. Not claiming, just steady, there. We're still 2 more chapters to go. But that night, under the soft hum of overhead lights and the smell of fresh paper, the story had already changed. The shelves were nearly full now. Nora stood near the front window of the new Willow Pages, arms crossed over her apron as she watched the afternoon light fall in golden streaks across the spines of new books. The space felt warm again, like a heart that had finally found its beat. Yet there was one thing still unsettled, one conversation left unfinished. Caleb arrived just as she flipped the open soon sign to the window. He carried 2 coffees, his steps slow, measured. Gone was the awkward tension of betrayal, but in its place was something quieter, unspoken, heavy with what could be and what had been. "I figured you'd be here," he said gently, holding out the coffee. She took it. "You always seem to know." He offered a small smile. "Only when it matters." They sat near the register, where a small display of local authors waited to be arranged. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was intentional. It gave room for truth. "I've been thinking about everything," Nora finally said, her voice low. "About the bookstore, about you." Caleb nodded, listening. "I still don't know why you didn't just tell me who you were. I could have handled it." "I know that now," he said quietly. "But back then, I didn't trust that someone could care about me without the title. I wanted to be seen as just Caleb, not as Pinnacle Press's CEO. You were afraid," she said, not accusing, just understanding. He met her gaze, terrified. Nora looked down at the rim of her cup, her thumb tracing the lid. "I get it, you know. Being underestimated, hiding parts of yourself just to survive another day. But trust doesn't work in pieces. It's all or nothing." "I was wrong not to trust you," Caleb said. "But every choice I made, every risk, I made it because I believed in you, even if I did it from the shadows." She studied him for a long moment, the weight of his words settling between them. "And I hated that you lied," she said. "I hated it too. But I also saw how you stood by me. Every time Evelyn tried to tear me down, someone was there to help me back up. I didn't know it was you, but it felt like someone believed in me when I barely believed in myself." Caleb's throat tightened. That was real. All of it. A long pause stretched between them. Then Nora reached into the drawer behind the counter and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a flyer, mock-up for the grand reopening of Willow Pages. Bold letters across the top read, "Reimagined, rebuilt, reopened." And at the bottom, in cursive font, "Hosted by Nora Whitman and Caleb Reed." "I want you there," she said. "Not just as the guy who saved me in secret, but as the man who stayed." His voice cracked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Only if we're honest, moving forward. Always." The air seemed to soften between them. The store, for all its shelves and stories, suddenly felt like a chapter waiting to be written, not alone, but together. Caleb stood, reaching for her hand. She let him take it. "Then let's start the next one," she said. Outside, a group of children peeked into the window, pointing at the coming soon banner. A woman pushed open the door and asked when they'd be opening. Nora smiled. "Soon," she said brightly. "Very soon." She glanced at Caleb, and for the first time it felt like all the pieces had come together, the trust, the forgiveness, the promise of something new. The binding was mended. The story was far from over. The day Willow Pages reopened, sunlight bathed the storefront in a soft golden glow. Balloons tied to the door fluttered in the breeze, and a small crowd gathered beneath a hand-painted sign. Grand reopening. A new chapter begins. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp aroma of new books. The shelves were full, some donated, others handpicked by Nora herself. It was no longer just a bookstore. It was a sanctuary built on resilience, stitched together with late nights, second chances, and quiet sacrifice. Caleb stood near the back, watching Nora greet each visitor like family. She wore a light blue dress, her curls pinned back, and her smile radiant. There was no trace of the doubt or weariness she once carried. Today, she stood tall, her heart finally at ease. "Hey," Caleb said as he approached her at the register, slipping his hand gently into hers. "Hey yourself," Nora replied, squeezing his fingers. "I didn't think this day would ever come." "You made it come," he said. "You didn't just reopen a bookstore. You rewrote your own story." A tear welled in her eye, but she blinked it away. Not alone. They turned as a child ran past them, clutching a copy of Charlotte's Web. Laughter echoed through the room. Local authors signed books. Teenagers gathered in a corner to browse graphic novels. A retired teacher clutched a poetry anthology to her chest like it was treasure. In the far corner, a donation box read, "Willow Creek, Community Book Drive. Every story matters." Nora stepped up to the podium they'd placed near the window. Caleb gave her a reassuring nod as the crowd turned to listen. "I want to thank all of you," she began, her voice clear and warm. "Not just for being here today, but for believing in what this little shop could be. Willow Pages has always been more than just a store to me. It's been my dream, my lifeline during the hardest times." She paused, her gaze landing on Caleb. "And I want to thank someone very special. Caleb, your support, seen and unseen, has changed everything. You reminded me that real love shows up quietly and stays." Caleb's eyes glistened, his lips parting in quiet surprise. "I used to think strength meant doing everything alone," Nora continued. "But it turns out, real strength is letting people in, even when you're scared." Applause filled the store. Caleb stepped beside her and whispered, "That was beautiful." "I meant every word," she said softly, "especially the part about love that stays." After the crowd dispersed, Nora and Caleb walked through the aisles together, their hands intertwined. "Did you see the turnout?" she asked. "Evelyn must be fuming from wherever she's hiding." "She'll be fine," Caleb chuckled. "Hopefully she learned something from all this." Nora glanced at the donation box near the window. "I was thinking, maybe we expand the book drive, partner with local schools, get stories into the hands of kids who need them most." Caleb's face lit up. "Let's do it. We could even fund a mobile library, bring books to rural areas." "You really don't know how to do anything halfway, do you?" she teased. "Not when it comes to you." They paused in front of a small table holding a guest book. Nora leaned down, writing in it with steady, graceful strokes. Caleb peeked over her shoulder. She'd written, "To all who walk through these doors, may you find the courage to keep turning pages, no matter how tough the chapter." He smiled, then added underneath her line, "And may love, quiet, steady, and true, always find you where you least expect it." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows and golden rays across the windows of Willow Pages. The store buzzed with life, echoing the heartbeat of a town that had watched one woman rise, and the quiet man who never stopped believing in her. Together, they had turned pain into purpose and silence into story. The ending wasn't flashy. It was steady, honest, lasting, just like love should be. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or brought a tear to your eye, that's why we tell it. Stay with us for more powerful stories. See you next time.